It was during this time that he made his acquaintance of the man with whom his name would be forever linked, Doc Holliday. Wyatt himself later told the story in an interview with the San Francisco Examiner.
It happened in '77 when I was a city marshal of Dodge City, Kansas. I had followed the trail of some cattle thieves across the border into Texas, and during a short stay in Fort Griffin, I first met Doc Holliday and the woman who was known variously as Big Nose Kate Fisher, and on occasions of ceremony, Mrs. Doc Holliday. Holliday asked me a good many questions about Dodge City and seemed inclined to go there, but before he had made up his mind about it, my business called me over to Fort Clark. It was while I was on my way back to Fort Griffin that my new friend and his Kate found it necessary to pull their stakes hurriedly. Doc Holliday was spending the evening in a poker game, which was his custom whenever the faro bank did not present superior claims on his attention. On his right sat Ed Bailey. The trouble began, as it was related to me afterward, by Ed Bailey monkeying with the deadwood, or what people who live in the cities call discards. Doc Holliday admonished him once or twice to play poker, which is your seasoned gambler's method of cautioning a friend to stop cheating. But the misguided Bailey persisted in his furtive attentions to the deadwood. Finally, having detected him again, Holliday pulled down a pot without showing his hand, which he had a perfect right to do. Thereupon, Bailey started to throw his gun around on Holliday as might have been expected. But before he could pull the trigger, Doc Holliday had jerked a knife out of his breast pocket and with one sideways sweep had caught Bailey just below the brisket. Well, that broke up the game, and pretty soon Doc Holliday was sitting cheerfully in the front room of the hotel, guarded by the city marshal and a couple of policemen, while 100 miners and gamblers clamored for his blood. You see, he had not lived in Fort Griffin very long, while Ed Bailey was well liked. It wasn't long before Big Nose Kate, who had a room downtown, heard about the trouble and went up to take a look at her doc through a back window. What she saw and heard led her to think that his life wasn't worth 10 minutes' purchase, and I don't believe it was. There was a shed at the back of the lot, and she set fire to it. She also got a 6-shooter from a friend down the street, which with the one she always carried made 2. It happened just as she had planned it. The shed blazed up and she hammered at the door yelling, "Fire!" Everybody rushed out except the marshal, the constables, and their prisoner. Kate walked in as bold as a lion, threw one of her 6-shooters on the marshal, and handed the other to Doc Holliday. The two of them backed out of the hotel, keeping the officers covered, and the pair of them got away safely and rode the 400 miles to Dodge City, where they were installed with great style when I got back home. Such, then, was the beginning of my acquaintance with Doc Holliday, the mad, merry scamp with heart of gold and nerves of steel, who, in the dark years that followed, stood at my elbow in many a battle to the death. He was a dentist, but he preferred to be a gambler. He was a Virginian, but he preferred to be a frontiersman and a vagabond. He was a philosopher, but he preferred to be a wag. He was long, lean, and ash blonde, and the quickest man with a 6-shooter that I ever knew. It wasn't long after I returned to Dodge City that his quickness saved my life. He saw a man draw on me behind my back. "Look out, Wyatt," he shouted. But while the words were coming out of his mouth, he had jerked his pistol out of his pocket and shot the other fellow before the latter could fire. On such incidents as that are built the friendships of the frontier.
Wyatt Earp's fond image of Doc Holliday wasn't shared by many others. Bat Masterson later wrote of Holliday,
Holliday had a mean disposition and an ungovernable temper, and under the influence of liquor was a most dangerous man. Holliday seemed to be absolutely unable to keep out of trouble for any great length of time. He would no sooner be out of one scrape before he was in another.
Meanwhile, Bat Masterson was working his way to being sheriff of Ford County. His appointment by Sheriff Bassett as the undersheriff made it clear who Bassett thought was the best man for the job. Bassett himself had served a maximum of 3 terms. With that support, Bat took the office. For a short time, the brothers Masterson served together as lawmen in Dodge, till it ended tragically on April 9th, 1878.
April 25th, 1878. On the evening of the 9th, at 10 o'clock p.m., 6 pistol shots rang out on the south side of the railroad track. A party of 6 cowboys who had arrived in town in the evening had been enjoying themselves with dancing and drinking, some of them evidently getting too much liquor. Marshal Masterson and Policeman Haywood, being the custodians of the public peace, were present, prepared to prevent any disturbance or trouble among the boys. One of the boys, named Jack Wagner, got to be very noisy. About this time, the city marshal observed that he was carrying a 6-shooter, contrary to city ordinance, and proceeded to disarm him, which he accomplished without much trouble, and turned the pistol over to Wagner's boss, A.M. Walker. The dance went on, and all appeared to be in peace and harmony. The marshal stepped out the front door to the sidewalk, where he again met Wagner, and saw that Wagner was again in possession of his pistol. He at once attempted to take it from him. A scuffle ensued. A general rush was made from inside the hall to the sidewalk. Policeman Haywood stepped forward to assist the marshal, but just as he did so, 2 other cowmen drew their pistols upon him and held him in position. One of them snapped a pistol in his face, which fortunately missed the fire.
As Ed and Wagner struggled with the gun, it went off, shooting Ed Masterson in the abdomen. The shot set Ed's shirt on fire. Ed drew his own revolver and shot Wagner, then turned his aim to the man holding a gun on Policeman Haywood and shot him as well. Both of the cowboys died of their wounds, but so did Ed Masterson about an hour after being shot. Later, Bat Masterson arrested 4 other cowboys involved in the incident which killed his brother. Ed Masterson was a respected officer, and his loss was hard for the city. The city council passed resolutions declaring their respect for him, and all businesses were closed for the funeral, which was the largest that Dodge City had ever seen to that point. But the following month, a notice appeared in the Wichita Eagle.
Wichita Eagle, May 16, 1878. Wyatt Earp, well known in this city and for a long time connected with our police force, received an offer of $200 per month to take the marshalship of Dodge City, which he went up to accept, with all its dangers and responsibilities, last week.
Wyatt was going back to Dodge. Wyatt was hired as an assistant marshal under Charlie Bassett, who had moved from the sheriff's office to the marshal's. Working with Wyatt was another of Bat Masterson's brothers, Jim. Jim and Wyatt both racked up high numbers of arrests, primarily for offenses such as carrying a pistol, being drunk and disorderly, or acting in an angry or violent manner. Each arrest gave an officer a $1 bonus, so they took every advantage to earn that money. Wyatt, the Mastersons, and other law officers in Dodge had reputations as skilled gunfighters. whether those reputations were deserved or not, in truth, they were not trigger-happy lawmen. They were well practiced in the art of buffaloing unruly cowboys, which meant smashing them on the head with their heavy revolvers. Certainly, a harsh practice from the perspective of the 21st century, and probably from the perspective of the cowboys. Earp historian Alfred E. Turner quoted a letter from S.D. Allen describing Earp in action as an officer in Dodge.
I will conclude my letter by relating to you the only story Father ever told me which concerns Wyatt Earp as a marshal in Dodge City. He said it was a typical arrest. My father and a group of friends were gathered around a billiard table watching a game when Wyatt entered the room and pointed at one of the number, saying that he wanted him. The man approached Earp and they talked for a while. Then Earp swung him around, searched him, taking a knife and a number of shotgun cartridges from him. Earp then pushed him towards the door, and the cowboy spun about and returned the compliment, whereupon Earp punched him in the face and dragged him towards the street. On the sidewalk, the prisoner began to struggle, telling Earp to let go and cursing him loudly. Soon they were fighting, and Earp butted the man and then tripped him, sending him sprawling into the street. Before he got up, Earp cracked him over the head with his revolver, opening a deep gash. A doctor had to be called to the jail to attend to the prisoner's head, and friends of the cowboy, my father was one, complained to the mayor about Earp's treatment of his prisoner, but got the brush off. I'm not suggesting Earp was a bully. He seems to have been a very brave and intelligent man, but I am pointing out to you that the reason he lasted so long was because he knew better than to allow his adversaries to get the upper hand.
This typical arrest does sound rough on the arrestees. But while those cowboys might have suffered aching skulls, they weren't bleeding out on the streets of Dodge. The saloon keepers and brothel owners certainly appreciated lawmen who could keep their clientele alive and spending money, and presumably those arrested would prefer being hit to being shot. In fact, there's only one time that Earp is believed to have shot a man while in Dodge.
It seems that 3 or 4 herders were paying their respects to the city and its institutions, and as is usually their custom, remained until about 3 o'clock in the morning when they prepared to return to their camps. They buckled on their revolvers, which they were not allowed to wear around town, and mounted their horses, when all at once one of them conceived the idea that to finish the night's revelry and give the natives due warning of his departure, he must do some shooting, and he commenced to bang away, one of the bullets whizzing into a dance hall nearby, causing no little commotion. Policeman Earp and Jim Masterson made a raid on the shootist, who gave them 2 or 3 volleys, but fortunately without effect. The policeman returned the fire and followed the herders with the intention of arresting them. The firing then became general. The herders rode across the bridge, followed by the officers. A few yards from the bridge, one of the herders fell from his horse from his weakness caused by a wound in the arm, which he had received during the fracas. The other herder made good his escape. The wounded man was properly cared for, and his wound, which proved to be a bad one, was dressed by Dr. McCarty. His name is George Hoy.
A few weeks later, the wounded man died. Although it was never entirely clear whose bullet killed George Hoy, Wyatt believed it was his.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.